Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. It is time to draw out the holy water and pack the stakes in the bag. Tonight, we are talking all about ghost and monster hunting. But before we get too far down that road, I'm Jim Nettles and going to be your host tonight. Let's see who else has decided to join this merry band of troublemakers. So, Don, you're up first.
I'm Don Bingle. I've written 8 books and about 60 short stories. On the horror side, I've got the Love-Hate Case Files, which is about some lawyers who represent supernatural creatures in a magic-filled modern-day San Francisco, including some ghosts. And I also edit a ghost story anthology called Familiar Spirits, which I can hold up here in front of my face, and maybe you can see it. Or not.
No, you actually just blend entirely in with your background.
I went entirly headless. Always a good thing for monster hunting to go entirely headless. Don't worry about it. You can find it on my website.
Elizabeth?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Davis. I am one half of Dead Fish Books, a small micropress out of Dayton, Ohio. I've written quite a few ghost stories and have read so many more.
Kelley?
My name is Kelley Frank. I am a horror artist and author, and ghosts are my spooky jam.
Rick?
Hey, my name is Rick Gualtieri, and I am the author of 30 some odd books. You can see some of them behind me by a magnifying glass. But yeah, it's across fantasy, horror comedy, what have you. So if there's monsters in it, chances are I've either killed it or had people killed by it.
He's also
or
an
been
author
intimate
of
with it, but that's a different story. Jenny?
I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dow Books. I also write under a variety of pen names and in all lengths and genres, and many of the monsters that I've written about are on the screen behind me because monsters can show up anywhere and in any genre, which makes it really fun.
Lola?
You're on mute, Lola.
My name's Lola Strickland. I write paranormal and sci-fi. All of my short stories are for free online because I got rejected once and panicked and never tried again. And I also wrote one book and put it online on Amazon, and then I just stalled and I've been working on the 3rd draft of my 2nd novel for a long time, and one day I will finish it, and y'all will know what I do because I'll be rich and famous and won't come on here anymore.
But how do we get to your website with all the free stories?
Well, that's another story. Apparently, I screwed up my lolalarcy.com and it went down, and so I've got to get it back up. A lot of it's on archive.org, or you can just Google and find it. I'm going to work, I swear, I will work on getting my lolalarcy.com back up. But I got my email back because I was really scared about that. Okay.
So, Amy, you're bringing up the rear. You know what they always say about them, yes.
Well, I'm the baby author here. I'm the writer of the Restless Spirit series, which is about a group of ghost hunters. It's what I like to call, or what my publisher likes to call, cozy horror, which basically means it's more spooky than scary. And it's a lot of fighting ghosts and kissing.
Romancing the ghost.
No, it's the ghost hunters that are romancing, not the
okay.
I mean, they could romance the ghost if they wanted to. No one here is judging.
You don't kink shame.
And that's an entirely different genre, and that's an entirely different kind of hunting. We'll be working on that in another episode.
Very true. So,
before we go too far off the rails this evening, let's talk a little bit about the ghost hunting side of things. So, we've got our fun spectral, essences, whether they're conscious or not. Sometimes they're nice and benevolent. Other times they're a little bit more mischievous to malevolent. So when you're talking about working in stories, what are the kinds of tropes you like to play with in terms of both your haunts and haints, as well as those that haunt them? So, Don, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I think the thing about ghosts for me is they come in all sorts of varieties. and they're not necessarily evil, and they're not necessarily bad, and they don't necessarily deserve to be hunted or dissipated or expelled or anything like that. You need to get to know your ghosts to find out what you want to do with them. And certainly in love-hate case files, there are all sorts of supernatural creatures that most people think of as other than human and evil. And the lawyers there don't necessarily regard that as true. But I've also done ghost stories about time-traveling ghosts, about benevolent ghosts, and I think that jumping to the conclusion that ghosts are bad and need to be gotten rid of is not necessarily the case.
How about you, Elizabeth?
Well, it's like I was on a panel last week all about this subject. That would be the Haunted Places panel. Please check it out on ConTinual YouTube channel and the Facebook page.
Hey, we're going to put you to work at this rate.
Yeah, seriously. But what I was going to say real quick and not just summarize that whole panel was I like it when the spirits intrinsically tied to the haunt really help, and you help get a sense of place with the spirit as well.
How about you, Kelley? Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
I said, and that's the most classic approach. I do appreciate a few subversions, such as, oh, we don't have, noblemen haunting this castle. Instead, we got dumb tourists who fell off the walls and still running around in their khaki shorts and cameras flash, taking pictures of everyone. That's what all the mysterious flashing lights is.
Oh, in other words, my future.
Yeah, but that's a conscious decision. You just don't want to sit there and go, spooky house and random spooky ghosts and just slap them together without any real thought of how to connect them.
So how about you, Kelley? How do you like to play with your ghosts and their hunters?
Well, I have two methods I like. On the one hand, I really do like the slow burn of like a haunting that may be a haunting, may just be things just happening around the person, and still suddenly they recognize that, no, this is too many coincidences and something very bad is happening. I like that sort of psychological terror of a haunting. The other way I like it is a haunting that doesn't necessarily have like a reason for it. You're not like, oh, it was a person who died ages ago and suddenly there's something who's here and we know who they are and their backstory and why they're hanging out here and all this kind of stuff. Just some kind of a badness in a location, and we don't know why it's working the way that it does. It just does, and it's clearly centered around a spot. It's just a repetition of a problem that's almost like cursing of people, kind of Ju-on or the Grudge style, something like that. I like that kind of psychological terror of a horror.
More than Memorex, a little bit smarter than that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yes, hopefully.
How about you, Rick?
I think one of the fun things I have, since I have multiple series going, is that I can hit things like ghosts and monsters from both sides. Like in one, they're looking at it from a scientific perspective, so maybe they have their EM reader. In another, ghost shows up and they didn't accept it, be like, yeah, okay, everything else is real, why not ghosts? But one thing I always like to leave is that whatever's going on, whatever that spirit is trapped here, I always like to leave that mystery of what happens when they move beyond, like when they go into the light and stuff. That's like one aspect that I just like to have that, like that, because even in a series where like we're saying vampires and werewolves are real, I like to have that aspect where, yeah, okay, there's monsters and stuff, but even they have no idea what ultimately happens to us.
Jenny, how about you?
Well, it always cracks me up when people say, oh, I can believe in werewolves and vampires, but not ghosts. To me, the ghosts are the easiest of the paranormal to accept. If we accept that we have souls and spirits, it's very easy to say, for me to easily say and frankly believe that, yeah, some would go and some would stick around for a variety of reasons. So I have no issue believing in ghosts or having any of that. So I guess a trope I don't like that I try to avoid is the ghosts. How could there be ghosts? Because to me, that just seems like the easy leap. To a vampire or werewolf, that's a hard leap for me to make. in reality. I write about them all the time, but it's hard for me to say, oh, of course I believe in them. No, I don't. But ghosts, yeah, absolutely. So what I don't, I guess I'm going into the don't like already. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of the questions, but there is a difference between a ghost and a haunting and a poltergeist and an evil spirit and a demonic spirit. And I don't like when they all just get lumped together because they're not the same thing. So anything I'm writing, I try to make it clear that there's all these hierarchies of these things. They're different. They're essentially a different slice of the pie. So that just because, I mean, in the Night Beat Necropolis Enforcement Files, Cotton Mather's a ghost, okay? And he's on the side of right, and my main character loathes him because he's completely unapologetic for the witch trials. But he's a ghost, and so he has ghost qualities, ectoplasm. He can't do the same things the other characters can do, but he is completely different from a demon or a demonic, whatever, because they're just a different thing to me. So I like to make sure that what I would, I know the repeaters where it's just a scrap of a memory that's so strong that just keeps going through versus someone who's actually haunting you. And most spirits haunting are haunting for a reason. And I guess I like the one where you find it, like the Sixth Sense, where you find what they need and then they can go free.
How about you, Lola? How do you like your haunts?
I like it when we have the ghost perspective, and the ghost is a person, not just a bunch of tropes put together, but a person, and you feel how the person is feeling, you experience what they're experiencing, and they're just going about their life. It's just a lot longer than other people's, and I'm sure it gets pretty boring sometimes.
Amy?
Oh, my turn. Okay. Well, with my ghosts, it's pretty much what a lot of people have said so far, but the perspective I come from is the ghosts were once people, and just like people, some can be good, some can be bad. You just don't automatically turn into evil. I mean, unless something really bad happens to you and you want revenge. But I play with revenge tropes. I play with some traditional types things, curses, that kind of thing. And my series basically has psychics and ghosts, and that's about it. I stick with the one thing.
So here, since we're here to talk about the hunters and those that seek our poor hapless spirits hanging through the ectoplasm and the ether. So Elizabeth, when you think about those that are investigating or hunting or maybe even looking to banish said poor souls, what is it you want to see in ostensibly your people that are out trying to do this? What is it we want to see from that side of humanity? What is it you like to play with?
Well, what I love to do is just rip off the BPRD from Hellboy. But I can say some tropes I definitely love from there is when you have monsters on the crew, because that gives I'm counting ghosts as monsters in this case, because it gives a nice chance for some extra human perception and viewpoints and story, along with cool powers to play with, and allows for interesting team dynamics that you can externalize more than you can with just regular humans. You can make jokes about someone who has a fiery personality versus a cool personality. But it's even funnier if we make one a fire elemental and one a yeti.
And singe the fur. So Kelley, how about you? What do you like to see in your hunters, your investigators, the one, regardless which side of the story they're on? What do you like to play with in those kinds of ideas?
Well, if my hunters are going to be like the good guys that I'm going to follow, I need to have them have compassion for the situation that these individuals or creatures are in, or the people who are being haunted. They need to have some level of compassion. I'm a big fan of like poltergeist and the psychic idea that comes in and tries to help them cleanse the house. And And that whole investigative team, that was so well done in Poltergeist, and you really got character development with that. I have a little bit more trouble with like the Van Helsing style, not like Dracula, but like the Van Helsing style of, I don't like this and I'm going to take it out. And that's where it needs to go because it belongs in hell. I really have a hard time buying that and using that in my fiction. I feel like for me personally, I want it to be a little bit more ethically and morally complex.
Rick?
I'm gonna play off what Kelley said, because in my Tales of the Crypto Hunter series, they're kind of in between what she's describing in that Van Helsing, in that these people who are tasked with hunting cryptids, their primary job is to save people. They're not there. There's nothing malicious there. So they're conservationists at heart, but they also know that there comes a point where you have to pull the trigger. And like, and they understand that, like, that not pulling the trigger, like, at the right time is going to cost lives. So I kind of like playing with that mix of like, yeah, we don't want to have to put this creature down, but there's like 12 hikers missing in this area, and this thing's got blood on its lips, and we don't want a 13th hiker to go missing.
Baker's dozen. So Jenny, how about you? What is it you like to see out of your monster hunters?
It depends on what I'm writing, if it's going to be funny or if it's not. My story for Predator, there's some humor, but not very much, because the predators are hunting them, they have to hunt back. It's not really not a scenario where you can be kind about it. Same with anything when I'm doing kaiju. If any kind of kaiju writing, it's really us against them. There is no middle ground. But on a lot of stuff, especially the ones dealing with ghosts, again, I like to see pretty much what everybody's saying, that the balance of you're not just evil because you're dead and still here. What I really loathe and try to avoid is doing anything like the ghost hunters do on television. I just think it's so rude to come into someone's house and start screaming and banging. Are you here? Are you here? It's like they never show up when someone's making noise. Have these people never made that connection that they're showing up in the middle of the night and it's silent? And so they come in there banging. I wouldn't show up for them too, or I'd be really nasty, one or the other. So other than playing that for laughs or as a counterpoint, I try to make sure that regardless of what side of the fence they're on monsters good, monsters bad, no one's acting like the ghost hunter people do.
Lola, what are the things that you like to see in your investigators, your hunters, those folks?
I like to see when really funny things happen. Now, subtly, I don't need to be slapstick or anything, but it can be really surprising and jarring when something just really funny happens and you laugh, and it can just really turn something on its dime. So I like that kind of aspect of it where, it's not all doom and gloom, I'm not pretentious. My goth phase ended 30 years ago, and I was not a good goth because none of my blacks matched anyway. That gray black, that green black. So my goth phase is over. I like levity. I like humor because it actually brings out the humanity in people, ghosts, monsters, whatever. So I like that kind of humanistic aspect of humor.
How about you, Amy?
My ghost hunters come from it from a it is a long day. Anyway, sorry, I was at work all day. My ghost hunters come from it from an emotional standpoint. That's what I'm trying to say. They don't see the ghosts as monsters per se most of the time. I mean, yeah, if someone's like throwing men from a building, that might be a problem, but my ghost hunters want to figure out why. Why is this happening? And how can they help not only these people, but maybe this ghost as well? And they're more in for it to sort of see if they can help everybody if possible. So compassion, love, and also a very hopeful outlook. So very optimistic.
How about you, Don?
Well, like Ginny, I think that a lot of the ghost hunters that you see on television are basically idiots that get spooked by the slightest thing. And I'm sorry, I think that if you go into any building that's been vacant for any period of time, there's going to be things falling. There's going to be critters scurrying about. There's going to be poor electrical connections and breezes and all sorts of things that really don't amount to much in terms of trying to indicate that there's a ghost there. In connection with one story I wrote, I did a lot of research into the effects of infrasound on people, which is, by the way, one of the reasons that deep organ music spooks some people. And infrasound can cause all sorts of auditory and visual effects on people. And so I want my ghost hunters to actually be smart about what does indicate that a ghost is there and what does not indicate that a ghost is there. And I please do want them, if they're going to try to communicate with a ghost from, 15th century Germany, not to be talking to it in English. Just have a little respect for the craft.
Well, since we've talked about the good side of things, and we all know that the Ghost Hunters is bad acting anyway, what are the tropes? What are the ideas? What are the things that you don't like to see? What are the things that turn you off in the story? What are the things that, even if it's something that can be done well, what are the things that you usually see done really badly? So, Kelley, how about you? What are the things you don't like or that you see done really poorly frequently?
Oh, I will say that one of the, I'm going to get some flack for this, but one of the current movies that has a movie series that has a lot of hauntings in it that I really just can't stand is the Conjuring universe. I have a really hard time with it because everything goes back to it's a demon. And it really annoys me because there's different types of hauntings, historically and folklore and things like that. And it just seems to me like all they want to do is just collect things to put in their little creepy room, just to say that they have a creepy room. And I don't like that kind of trophy hunting angle. It feels very almost colonialist to me, people going into, that's how we had the buffalo almost wiped out, is from people just over hunting because they could. And that kind of trophy hunting and just getting rid of things because you can, and all you have to do is put a cross at it and it's just gone. That really bothers me. I need a little bit more complexity to it. Not everything needs to be like the devil. I'm okay, but we kind of moved past this in the 1500s. I want something a little bit more, just a little something that dwells on the complexity a little bit more, figuring out what caused it and all that kind of stuff. Like we've all said with the good things. But I feel if it's just, oh, there's a ghost. Okay, let's throw some crosses at it. Okay, it's gone. Yay. We have no consideration for anything else. That really, really bothers me. And I have a hard time with stories like that.
How about you, Rick? What are the things that you don't like, that you see done really poorly?
I think it gets back to some of the ghost hunting shows out there, especially Ghost Adventures. Don't even get me started on Zach Beckens. But like in a cartoon like Scooby-Doo, I guess it's kind of amusing to have a Shaggy who's an investigator who runs away from everything. But it's kind of annoying to watch when it's real people, and it's annoying to watch if it's in a story. And why would you do this if you're just terrified of the concept? It makes no sense to me. One thing I'll give Ghost Hunters, that show, credit for is in the first season, the guys in charge yell at two of the guys who run away, and they're no, we're running towards this stuff, not away from it. And they don't do that in other ghost hunting shows. Like Don said, it's okay, hey, water's dripping somewhere. Oh, it's a demon. Let's run. And it just that just drives me nuts. And encrypted shows, the whole concept of let's shine the camera anywhere but where we're hearing the noise. That's the other thing that annoys me.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about the folly of running recklessly in a abandoned building.
That too.
So, Jenny, how about you? What are the things that when you're looking at the ghost hunting or you're looking at the monster hunters, what are the things that you see done really poorly that annoy you to death? What are those things for you?
I'm going to actually echo Kelly, Don, and Rick. There's nothing about any ghost hunter show or any of these hunter shows that I think is any good. I don't know if any of you watch the show Psych, but they like do a whole spoof on searching for Bigfoot. And that's exactly what I think they're really going to find. Okay. It's going to be a giant guy in a bear pelt. Right. And it's hilarious. And Sean's totally making fun of it the whole way through because he should be, because they're doing it so badly. I also want to speak for the many, many billions of people who are not Christian. That really depends on if your vampire was a Catholic, right? Because if your vampire happens to be Jewish, you show a cross, he's going to go, oh, really? Isn't that quaint? Right? So I think the whole and vampires and werewolves come out of Catholic mythology, so it's understandable why that happens. But I think the fact that no one bothers to do the remotest form of where did these creatures come from, why are they in the zeitgeist in the way they are, and that almost all of them refer back to religion or hoaxes, Bigfoot, and so forth. So I really, when it's just like Kelly said, throw up a cross and it's all fixed. If someone was murdered and their ghost is haunting an area because they're desperate for someone to avenge them, you tossing a cross isn't going to make a bit of difference. Why don't you say, is it this picture or this picture, right? And then the other one, and this drives me crazy. Doug mentioned it. You're talking. You think your ghost is a 15th century German. You can't bother to say even a single word of German or have phrases that would have been used appropriately. Are you there? Are you there? There's protocols that existed before the last century that would have made any ghost say, oh, no, we're not introduced. I can't say hello to you. Just things like that. So I think a complete lack of care about anything other than ghost monster bad and a Christian symbol fixes everything. Those just drive me nuts.
Lola, how about you? What are the things that you see, read? What are the things that don't work for you?
First of all, I have to say I took a year of German in between high school and college, so I'm ready. Ich liebe dich, which means I love you. Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs. That's 1 through 7. Ich eine Berliner. I don't remember. Anyways, I'm ready for the German. Huh?
Ausgezeichnet.
See, I don't remember what that means.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. See, wunderbar. I remember that. So I'm ready for this German ghost hunt. I could, I will be the translator as long as it's just 1 through 7 and I love you. So anyways, one thing that bugs the heck out of me, and this is something that would happen in Buffy, and it drove me crazy. The hunters are not allowed to kill humans. No, that's verboten, which is German for forbidden. Look at me. It's verboten. You cannot kill a human, no matter if they're a serial killer or, if they're just a horrible person who's torturing toads. You cannot kill them. Giles would not let Buffy kill humans at all. And then he turned around and killed that poor guy who had been possessed by a goddess person. So it's like, not all monsters are supernatural people.
Mhm.
They're very bad people. And, I live in this land where, if you're being hurt, there's self-defense. And you're allowed to act in self-defense, even against humans. So that bugs the heck out of me. I'm like, no, I want to see them defend themselves and not be like, oh, but they're human. They have a soul. Hitler may have had a soul. We don't know. But that doesn't mean they're perfect and great and deserve riches and gold. No, if they're hurting people, then you hurt them back.
And the good news is steak will work just as well if they're human.
For anything.
Yeah, they certainly will.
So, Amy, how about you? Since we know that your particular hunters are off making out in the wilderness, ignoring.
What life is much better when you're making out with someone. Come on.
Exactly.
Anyway, the things that bother me, I don't actually have a whole lot of things that bother me. I tend to like things that everybody else hates. So, so I actually kind of like some of the ghost hunter shows because I think they're hilarious. It just brings a big smile to my face. Just don't take them seriously, and it's just a bunch of fun. Anyway, I guess the one thing that would bother me, or that bothers me mostly if I'm picking up a book about monster hunters or ghost hunters, is if you don't really take the time to develop the characters on either side. If they're all one dimension, then I'm not going to connect to any of them, and I'm not going to care what happened, and I'm going to throw the book across the room, and that'll be it.
And it's really bad when it's a
the
Kindle.
one thing that, I'm sorry, what?
I said it's a really bad thing when it's a Kindle.
Yeah, I don't want to throw the Kindle.
You don't get that
across.
dunk compared to a book when it's your Kindle.
But yeah, I prefer my monsters and my ghosts to have a bit more of a character rather than just Gar, I'm going to eat you. And the same on the other side too, just Gar, I'm going to kill you. So I like to have characters that I want to connect to.
Don, how about you?
Well, when you are talking about writing, or you're talking about writing an adventure for a role-playing game or something like that, one of the catchphrases is that everybody's the hero of their own story. And I want to see that in the ghosts too. I want to understand why the ghosts are doing things that they're doing. Are they draining people of life force because they need it to stay alive and not just because they're mean? Are they, bothering a particular location because they can't go anywhere and it's driving them insane? Are they trying to get something fixed, which is a kind of a staple or trope of many ghost stories, but it's not necessarily the case that they're one-dimensional, just like Amy said, or two-dimensional. They need to be three-dimensional, even though they're ephemeral. And I think that spending more time trying to figure out why the monsters or why the ghosts are doing what they're doing and what can be done to resolve that issue short of going to war with them is a worthwhile exercise.
Elizabeth?
Well, I'm right now trying to think of the best way for this not to overtake the whole panel, because me being a monster hipster, apparently, I'm trying to par down to I liked Wendigos before they were cool to a length that is suitable for this and not just a whole separate panel like making Rick review all the Ghost Hunter shows would be. Which boils down to a lot of these monsters have a cultural context that you probably should try to at least somewhat understand before you pull them out and use them willy-nilly. Such as I recently attended a lecture from the Victor Wind Museum on trolls, all about just trolls and barely scratching the surface of the hour of all the different roles that trolls play in Scandinavian folklore stories. And there's a lot you can dig in there, and it really seems to be a shame if you were to just go, oh, this is a troll, it's a big ugly thing, and leave out, oh, it's a lot of these trolls have ties to the landscape of Scandinavia, or hey, these trolls are really good at building or stuff like that. Just file off the numbers and make them super generic monster is a constant frustration to me. Also, you should never use...
Oh, go ahead.
Also, supernatural. Why would a Nazi runes work against a Wendigo? Yes, I'm still bitter from the episode.
So when we start looking at and talking about the different kinds of hunters, and we've kind of hinted this a little bit, what are the things that are different when you're writing your ghost hunters versus when you're looking at your monster hunters? Because you've got somebody who's chasing something that's potentially ephemeral and not physical, versus something that may be physical. So, Rick, how about you?
Well, I'll just sum that up really easily. Guns, and I'm not a gun-born person, but one thing I try to make it. One thing I've always hated is, and especially you'll see this in bad sci-fi channel movies, is the invincible monster unless you find it's like one weakness. I've always despised that. So my ghost, I mean, obviously ghosts, like, they're ethereal and you don't really expect the bullet to do too much. But when you're hunting physical monsters, I'll have things like, okay, they'll have weaknesses. Like my Hybrid of High Moon series, silver hurts werewolves more. It, like, gets into their bloodstream, messes them up. But as like the characters learn, if you pump enough bullets into one's head, it's going down. You just need to use more of them. So yeah, I would say really it's just the tool. It's the tools of the trade. I haven't done too many ghost hunting stories. I've had people like interacting with ghosts, but not really hunting them. But on the monster side, it's having the right tools for that, which comes down to earlier. You don't want to have to use them, but if it comes down to it, well, you want to have enough firepower to ensure that you're the last one standing.
So, Jenny, how about you? What are the differences you see in terms of your hunters, whether they're going for the ghosts or going for the monster?
Any of my characters in any stories where they're dealing with ghosts, they're always approaching them as this is a person who's formerly alive, a person, an animal, thing. So there's always a different attitude towards the ghosts, in that they're expecting to be able to communicate in some way. They're hoping to free them or get their assistance, whether it's meeting them on the side, the side of right or not, or to solve the problem, fix what's holding these ghosts here, fix why this keeps happening. Versus in Monster Hunters, then there's one or two kinds. It's either we're all together, so it's monsters, fighting monsters, the Necropolis Enforcement File series. It's all the undeads, and it doesn't matter. You either pledged your soul to the gods and monsters or to the Prince of Darkness, and that's the division. So they're not really fighting each other so much as fighting I'm on the good side, I'm on the bad side. But like for something like Predator, you don't really have a choice. This is something that's going to try to kill you, and you really need to figure out how to kill it back. So a lot of the horror I write is Lovecraftian, and in that case, it just depends on, is my protagonist a human or is my protagonist a monster? If my protagonist is a monster, the monster is going to win in some way, shape, or form. And if it's a human, it's a 50-50 shot. But it depends on the story I'm telling. So in terms of how they act. So what is the ghost? What is the monster? What are they in the story? And that affects how the people that are hunting them or looking for them for help are going to react to it. So I'm all over the board.
Lola, how about you? How do you view the difference between your ghost hunters and your monster hunters?
Well, I'm thinking with the ghost hunters, it's a little less physical because they're using more instruments. And so they don't have to be, Michelle Yao, like, ooh, being best physical fitness and all the fighting and everything. So basically the ghost hunters are my Mary Sue because, that's me. I don't do any fighting or anything. And so they're a little bit more maybe focused more on intellectual. Not that the monster hunters aren't intellectual. It's just that the ghost hunters, it's pretty much all on the intellectual, the interpretation of data, research, which of course I love. And of course the monster hunters, they do research and all that, but they have to be able to protect themselves because monsters are tangible. Ghosts, depending on the ghost, they can hurt you too, but doing a drop kick to a ghost probably isn't going to do much except for drop your kick. So yeah, it's just a little different skill set, like Liam Neeson, special set of skills.
Amy, how about you?
Well, I just have the ghost hunters. I haven't written any monster hunters yet, but my ghost hunters, they're in it for the mystery, and instead of just, attacking the ghost, they're going to try to figure out what's going on and why that ghost is behaving the way it is. Also, my tech guy does have a gun that he has invented, a special gun that, when pointed at the ghost, will break the ghost apart. So he does have one little weapon that he carries around.
Don, how about you?
Well, I think the thing that makes ghosts more relatable to many people is the fact that people can believe in ghosts in a way that it's difficult for them to believe in monsters is kind of the crux for me. I think ghosts are inherently more sympathetic because and they're quite frankly lonelier. If you think about let's talk about the situation where you've got some German castle that's haunted by a bunch of 15th century Germanic ghosts or whatever. They're now occupying a world where no one speaks their language, where they're stuck in this location for eternity, which may have a few tourists or ghost hunters come through it now and then, but maybe forlorn and dilapidated and turn into a ruin that no one ever comes to. They're inherently more sympathetic and inherently lonelier, in my view, so I think that affects how they should be or whether they should be hunted. The other thing about monsters, aside from the if it bleeds, it can die, you have to think about what some monster hunters are all about. And it's not necessarily kill the monsters, it's exploit the monsters. Are we going to turn them into soldiers? Are we going to turn them into slave labor? Those are kinds of monster hunting that you can get some social commentary going on and mix things up rather than just having, a big fight scene. And so I think that's the key difference between ghosts and monsters for me. I think the people who hunt them are different. And I think by their nature, monsters can move around. They can hang around with other monsters. They can form families. They can have kids. Ghosts have very severe limitations on all those things. And I think it makes them inherently different.
Elizabeth, how about you? How do you like to view the difference between your ghost hunters and your monster hunters?
Well, I only have one group which hunts both. And if we're using ghost and just kind of broadly referring to spirits of various kinds, I'd say the line between ghosts and monsters gets murky real quick. If we just mean ghosts as formerly people, they don't do a whole lot of hunting of those. Those just tend to be more of sources of information of, hey, is there any ghost around who saw what went down? Could someone talk to them? Just because there are a lot of bigger fish they're trying to fry than what a individual ghost is up to. I'd say one difference with how the monsters versus spirits and all that get depicted is, well, we have a lot of monsters who are people, and by that they are assholes. Fucking assholes. We have some monsters that are pretty animalistic, such as we have a joke that you can't leave the corpse of the monster monster under your bed that you shot with your shotgun in the backyard, otherwise the chupacabras will get it, and then you'll never get the chupacabras to go away. They're like raccoons in the Southwest.
So Kelley, how about you? How do you like to view the difference between the ghost and monster hunters?
Well, I'm gonna echo that and say that for me, like most of the time when I'm writing like monster hunters, the monsters are people. So I think that gets into a whole other sort of thing than what we're talking about here. But for my ghost pieces, the ghost hunters typically are I'm pretty influenced by like Victorian spiritualism and the seances and spewing ectoplasm and automatic writing. And so that's kind of the way that I approach my ghost hunters. Is they're mostly trying to communicate, find out what the situation is, or learn something from the ghost, or ask for assistance from the spirit. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. So for me, the big difference is the act of interacting has to be sort of a diplomatic situation. And the act of interacting is often itself horrifying, but that's the way we learn something that we need for the next stage of the story. So that's usually how I approach it.
So, one of the big things when we were writing Monster Hunters, when we were going through and writing these stories, one of the core things, and we've already touched on this a fair amount, is that idea of motivation. Because there's got to be a reason that somebody has gotten into this, whether it's the family business, whether it's, monster killed person X, whatever the case may be. So if you were looking at or thinking about the stuff you like to write, those motivations that tend to work best with your monster hunters, whether it's ghost hunters, monster hunters, whatever else, what is the motivation that, and again, it's always going to be that it depends, but what is a motivation that you really like to work with that thrusts people into that position? So Jenny, I'm going to start with you on that one.
The hard ones. I would say I tend to put my characters into a situation where they're thrust into save myself, save the world kind of situation. So they don't have a lot of choice in whether or not they're going to hunt a monster, because the monster is hunting them. And if they don't stop the monster or monsters or whatever is going on, the evil human, then they're probably going to die. People they care about are going to die. The world could end, that kind of thing. And if you're dead, your world is ended. So I don't give them a lot of choice. Once I'm determined that that's what's going to be going on, then they're going to be thrust into it, whether they want to be or not. They usually don't want to be, but I just keep shoving them in there.
Lola, how about you?
The character I'm writing now, she's felt displaced her whole life, and there's a very real reason why she was displaced, but that would be a spoiler, so I won't say, but she's been displaced. She finds out when she's about 16 that she's part of a family of reapers, a whole community of reapers, and that's just her first job. I mean, they're like required to do that as a job. And she realizes that she wants to help these people because they are displaced. In some cases, they're literally on the bridge where they had jumped. And she wants to help them move on. She does, because they've been wandering for 100 years, just, on the bridge, not even able to leave the bridge. So she realizes that she can help them move to where they need to be, kind of like she eventually got moved to where she needed to be.
Amy, how about you? What do you like to give in the motivation, again, knowing that they're going to be sneaking off to go skinny dipping in the lake before they go chasing the ghosts?
No, they take breaks while chasing the ghosts, because you need to have a good work-life balance. But anyway, all 5 of my ghost hunters have their own motivations for being a part of this team, a part of this found family that they found with each other. And each book in the series focuses on a different member of the team. Anyway, so 2 of them grew up with ghosts. One enjoyed helping ghosts. One does not like doing it, but kind of fell into that because it was a family business. My tech guy thinks that everything is really cool. The tech is really cool. The ghosts are really cool. He doesn't much like getting beat up by the ghosts, but when he's not getting beat up, he thinks it's pretty cool. I have a reluctant psychic who isn't quite sure about his own powers, and he gets into it because he sees a ghost kill his best friend. And then I have another psychic who's an empath, and she's very emotional and wants to help people.
Don, how about you? When you look at the motivations, what do you like?
Well, first of all, I want to say to Amy, I've written a scene where people were skinny dipping with monsters about, and it did not go the way that I'm sure Amy wrote her scene.
No. You got to be away from the monsters to do that.
You have to be away from the monsters
because they can really interrupt work-life balance.
With the monsters.
In terms of motivations, I think that there's a number of these stories that deal with the fact that the person hunting or communicating or whatever with the ghosts or the monsters or whatever, has some kind of special ability to communicate or psychic ability of some sort. But that can also warp into being the focus of an attack by the monsters, or the focus of a haunting, or having prescient dreams. And I think the most interesting of those kind of forced to deal with the supernatural are where someone could actually ignore their gift or their ability to communicate or whatever by leaving the location or ignoring the entreaties to communicate, but that they can't, based on their own self-image, do that. And so they have to deal with that, whether that's because they have to help the creatures that are communicating with them move on, to into the light or whatever, or whether they have to deal with these monsters because they know that they're going to do bad things to other people if they don't stop them, and only they have the ability to do that. I think those are interesting stories, especially when there's a choice to be made by the person involved.
Elizabeth, how about you?
Well, for my series, that's first book is going through. Ian's getting another round of edits, freaking copy line edits. Learning to fly and other bizarre adventures. We got 2 characters who are hunting monsters because it's their community service for the numerous crimes they've committed against the public. One who does it because his duty, his family has done this for generations, and the last one who's doing it because she's a thorough chunky. Usually, in most of my short stories, it usually goes down to monsters trying to kill me because, short story, we don't have the longest time to flesh out a motivation here.
How about you, Kelley?
I think mine, a lot of mine, their motivation is essentially they're either very lonely and they're looking for something to like cling on to, maybe to prove that there's an afterlife or something like that to themselves. Or it could just be that they just really like research and problem solving and really want to find out, get to the bottom of a situation. A lot of it for me is either solving, finding out what really happened, a researcher that gets over their head, or in some cases with disastrous consequences. And in other cases, it's just a more quiet situation where a person is very lonely and finds out that they may have a haunting. And then how do they react to it? Do they freak out? Do they call paranormal investigators and learn from them? And then move on to go and doing other things to try to help other people? Or do they try to DIY it and mess up horribly, that kind of a thing?
Rick, how about you?
I mean, I kind of like my monster hunting teams have a pretty diverse background. I mean, the team from Bigfoot Hunters and Devil Hunters, they have all sorts of things. The leader of the team, Derek, he was a zoologist, and his an expedition into researching howler monkeys got attacked by a giant ground sloth. And he was amazed that these extinct creatures existed, and that's kind of why he does it. Mm-hmm. Other characters do have shared trauma and that they've lost family members because of these, and they want to make sure no other lives are lost. The medic of the team, Mitchell, basically kind of lucked into it. They met him on the side of the road. He helped him out, and he thought it was cool. And he's got a couple screws loose, so he just joined up. And one of them, the cameraman, who's I would probably say maybe the most realistic of them all, he does it because he likes the paycheck. He's like I get paid well, and I got I got this awesome gig. I get to see things that nobody else gets to see.
He's the Winston of the group, the most relatable Ghostbuster.
Yeah, he just genuinely likes his job.
Mm-hmm.
So as we start looking to wrap up here, there's always one thing that we haven't necessarily talked about that you want to get out there and talk about on the topic. So Amy, for you, what's the one thing we haven't talked about tonight about your hunters that you think we need to talk about, or somebody who's looking to start creating their own hunters? What's the one thing you think we would need to talk about?
Oh gosh. Of course, I have to go first on this one.
That's what happens when you're bringing up the rear. You know, you get snagged by the monster in the
Let's see, something that we need to talk about. Well, I think if you're creating your own group of monster hunters or ghost hunters, I think the most important thing is pretty much figuring out why these people like working together. What brings them together? Are they kind of a found family like mine, or are they just, they're comforting each other, or do they fall in love? Which also works for me too. So I think that's one of the most important aspects, especially in a series about a group of people, is pretty much having those family moments and those romantic moments, as well as the ghost hunting and the monster hunting.
How about you, Don? What's the one thing we haven't talked about tonight?
Well, I think that we haven't focused very much on the fact that ghost hunters, monster hunters, and ghosts and monsters all need to also deal with real life. They need to worry about sleeping. They need to worry about eating. They need to worry about where their money's going to come from, how they're going to pay the rent, how they're going to pay the mortgage, how they're going to deal with the people that are around them, and not have the cops get involved all the time, or how to escape the cops. If it's going to be a realistic, or at least quasi-realistic depiction of reality meeting the supernatural, people need to deal with real life in some way. And Supernatural did this very early on. There are a lot of discussions about the guys and the credit card fraud and that kind of thing. They got away from that as this series became more mythic, but it is still something that I think needs to be in any good ghost hunting or monster hunting recitation.
Elizabeth, how about you? What haven't we touched on tonight?
Well, what we haven't touched upon is a whole lot of monsters. We've mostly talked about ghosts. So I would probably say that one thing, if you want to be writing these sorts of stories, is to get yourself a big old book of monsters and randomly flip through it and read those entries. They'll definitely take you off the normal path, and you should hopefully get some interesting ideas by the time you've gone like 4 or 5 deep of randomly flipping through, going, we're going to now read about this today. You could do the same with Wikipedia, but then you end up with all the tabs open.
How about you, Kelley? What's the one thing we haven't touched on?
Well, I agree with Elizabeth on that. I think and I think that digging into like the intersection of history and magic and folklore and science is kind of like what makes these little genres so much fun. And so one thing that I get really annoyed with is the fact that, when Supernatural showed, I'm going to pick on Supernatural for a minute, but they showed, when someone was possessed, their eyes turned black, right? And then I can't tell you how many times I watch or read creepypastas or things like that. And then people are like, and their eyes were black, and so I knew it was the devil. And it's like, okay, find your own path. Research this stuff. Go and find out if you can create your own spin on it. Don't try to, you can use other people's ideas and build upon them, but you as the author can go in a million different directions and figure out what kind of history and mythology and whatever you find very, very interesting, and find a way to, incorporate that. If you read about some cool ghost that haunts some weird castle, awesome. Research that castle and put that into your story. Have a good time with it. That's the best way to come up with something that's more unique, because there are a ton of different monsters out there, but a lot of them have been sort of incorporated by pop culture, so they appear the way we expect them to appear. And that's not necessarily like, why does a Wendigo all the time seem to have a deer head? That's not
the original part of Wendigos.
No, it's not. I mean, it looks cool, but that's not anything to do with the Wendigo. The Wendigo is more like It's more like
Yeah.
a spirit than it is like a physical monster in the folklore.
I call it a very human monster, especially with the fact that it can be passed along as a psychosis and due to the actions you take.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times it's more more similar to like rabies than it is like a desiccated deer.
Yeah, I know. At one point, I make the joke in one of my stories of calling the deer-headed Wendigo the fake Wendigo, much like how you might come across some stuff that's like, oh, that's the fake monarch or something like that. Oh, that's a fake Wendigo. It's actually a different entity, but that's one of its common names because so many people have misidentifying it.
It's just interesting, you know, and I feel like, you know, dig into even folklore that you might think you're familiar with, dig into the actual history of it, because you might be surprised at how much like pop culture has influenced your interpretation of it. And you might find stuff about it that you haven't ever thought before that could really spark your creativity.
Yeah, there are a lot of elements you're going to find in folklore that are definitively pop culture that did not exist until fairly recently. So that's one of those things of don't rely on somebody else's mythology to create your own.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, how about you? What's the one thing you think we probably haven't touched on tonight about our monster hunters?
You guys brought up a good point. I mean, it's like a salad bar, you know, go up there and make your own plate. But one thing we haven't touched upon is mortality. And because oftentimes monster hunting can be a very dangerous job. And one thing I like to make it a point to do is, no matter what genre I'm writing, whether it's horror, whether it's comedy, whether it's fantasy, is I don't want you to think at any given time that that characters are safe or that death is a revolving door. That, like, you know, that, yes, I mean, I'm not going to George R.R. Martin all the characters, but at the same time, sometimes bad things are going to happen. And sometimes I'll reach a point in a story where I'm just like, there's really no conceivable way for this character to get out of this, and well, bye. Mm-hmm. And I mean, sometimes readers don't like that, especially if it's a really great character. But I think that keeps everyone on their toes, and I think it's just a realistic way of looking at it, in that you're in a profession where, you know, hey, you might be chasing this little skinny chupacabra, or this like 10-foot tall Sasquatch might step out from behind a tree, grab your head, and think it's a coconut. You know,
lucky people who get to stop after they die.
Mm-hmm.
I said, lucky people who get to stop after they die. They don't just become ghosts and realize, oh shoot, the contract still continues.
So, Jenny, how about you? What's the one thing we haven't brought up or touched on tonight?
There's a bunch that I thought of, but I actually kind of want to be supporting Amy here. Almost everything I write has romance in it in some way, shape, or form. And I don't think romance should be left out of this stuff. I think you raise stakes in a variety of ways. I have humans falling in love with monsters and vice versa, and so forth. So I don't think you should avoid any of that. I think you should look at it. I also want to give a very fast shout out to several movies that I think are really good in these genres. And you're going to notice that for the most part, they're all comedies. Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, and Zombieland, I think, are really, really good movies and I like both the original Ghostbusters and the female Ghostbusters. And I think they're really good movies. I think they show a variety of different things and ways. And those are out in the public zeitgeist. So shouldn't be making the next Zombieland, so to speak, or the next Ghostbusters, whatever, or the next Beetlejuice, but it gives you some really good, long-lasting examples of ways to go about it. I mean, in Beetlejuice, our ghosts, for the most part, they're not evil. They just had a bad day, and they end up being the heroes. So you can do all of those things. And I had another point, but I can't remember what it was, but romance should not be ignored in any of these. It is a part of life. And if you want to make three-dimensional characters, most of them will at one point in time fall in love, have their hearts broken, find a mate, lose a mate, and so forth. So romance, yeah.
Romance and relationships.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is a fantastic place for us to wrap this one up on. But before we get out of here, And this too evening goes out to the spirits. Let's make sure everybody knows where to find you and your work. So Don, you're up first.
You can always find my work at donaldjbingle.com. And I've got plenty of stories on simile and vocal also.
Elizabeth, where can we find you?
You can find me at deadfishbooks.com because that's where my bibliography hangs out. And my most recent published work is Woman Unbecoming, part of the anthology released by Crown Girls Press. My short story, that's a charity anthology for reproductive rights. My short story is When She Dances, inspired by the Ishtar dancing sing from the Sandman. And I mentioned this at the last panel, so those who are there will get to hear it again. We are open for submissions for our short story anthology. Yay, they're here. A collection of first contact stories that have to start off hopefully. How they end is up to you. Which, we accept super soft to super hard. So if you want to go, I want to make a ghost meet alien. Sure. I want to make Frankenstein and Chupacabra meet alien. Sure. I want to make alien Chupacabras. All the better.
How about you, Kelley?
You can find me on morbidsmile.com. That's MORBID smile.com. And I have everything there, including my commission pricing guide for art stuff, and then also my full bibliography, including film reviews and all of that.
Rick?
Well, you can find me at rickgualtieri.com. If you have trouble spelling that, which sometimes even I do, just Google Bill the Vampire, and that'll pretty much take you to some place that I'm at.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com is my website. I'm on Twitter at Gini Koch. I'm on Facebook far more than I should be, both as Gini Koch, author of the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series, and Hairspray and Rock and Roll. So you can find me there. I'm on Pinterest. And I continually forget to mention that I have a newsletter that you can sign up for either via, that's free. You can sign up for either via my Hairspray and Rock and Roll page on Facebook, or find the information on how to subscribe at the bottom of most of the pages of my website.
And Amy.
All right. You probably saw my cat go past. That was Dottie. Anyway, you can find me at amyravenel.com. That's RAV as in Victor, ENEL. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. And I also have a Facebook group, which is called Amy Ravenel's Library.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see everybody again soon. We've got to go fade into the evening. Bye, everybody.